Welcome to Humble Running's best trail running race shoes of 2025 edition here. Not the typical top or best running shoes of 2025 video here. What's the context of those videos? It's very important. Are we talking about training or racing? Or are we talking about one person's opinion? Or are we talking about a conglomeration of different reviewers' opinions, some random point system, this or that? You don't know what you're getting. I'm gonna lay out the context right here. These are shoes that I have actually raced in 2025, okay? So I'm not talking about the best training shoes, the best overall shoes, the best hybrid shoes. I'm not doing all these different categories, okay? These are shoes that I have trusted to race on my feet in 2025, okay? As you've probably seen on the channel, I have plenty of options to choose from when it comes to choosing the best shoe for performance on race day. And as all of you out there know, there are limited options to actually go out and race. You have a big training buildup, and then those racing days are few and far between in the grand scheme of things. So as a shoe tester and reviewer, I have those many options. I am not sponsored by any of these brands here. I'm not paid directly by any of these brands here. I have affiliate links, which of course help support Humble Running, but I am free to choose whatever I like and whatever I feel will give me the best performance on race day. So that's essentially what I do every time a race comes up. So I'm gonna go in chronological order, no categories here. Some shoes you may see, there may be overlap between a shoe that was great that I raced earlier in the year that I didn't go back to, and there may be shoes later in the year that I could have run earlier, and there's certainly some shoes here that are pretty versatile and would work for a few of the different races. Not all of them, but I could certainly have run certain shoes in multiple different races of the year, but I did choose to kind of mix it up a little bit, but I still felt like I did choose the best shoe most of the time for each race. So again, I'm calling this the best racing shoes of 2025 based on my own personal testing experience here. I did race these shoes. There may be a shoe or two on here that I felt like might not have been the best pick. So perhaps it is not one of the best racing picks of 2025, but I did race in it. So in retrospect, I'll talk about why that wasn't the case, maybe why I would have went with something different. Also at the end, I'm gonna go through some what you would call honorable mentions, shoes that didn't necessarily make the cut for whatever reason or another. Maybe I didn't get them at the right time of year, or I got them after a race that I would have wanted to have, or I would have wished I would have had it in time to race at a previous race. Maybe I'm excited for running that shoe in 2026. I'll also take a look at some models that I have now that are coming out in 2026 that could be, I think, top race options in 2026. And I will kind of relate that to the models that I did choose in 2025 and talk about why I'm excited for those shoes, why those could possibly be similar to shoes that I did choose for a particular race in 2025, and why I may choose a newer shoe in 2026. And also talk a little bit about my race calendar. I have a couple of different type of events, some of the same events I'm going to try to go back to, but a couple different things coming up, and I'll talk about maybe different shoes for that type of race that I didn't necessarily choose or have the opportunity to choose in 2025. So here we go, chronological order, January 2025, first race of the season out in Wilson Creek, Idaho. Very cold, kind of rugged. You never know what type of weather you're gonna get out there. It was actually kind of warm out there. There was no snow on the course this past year. 20-miler Wilson Creek, I chose the Norda 005. This shoe was brand new. I had tested it through the fall, and it was really my first opportunity to race it, and I thought 20 miles would be a good kind of test distance and duration, and the terrain was kind of variable. There's a lot of like steep climbing, there's some descents, a lot of smooth running sections. It's kind of like it's not an ultra race, but 20 miles is a good distance to get a good handle on this shoe, and I thought this shoe performed excellent out at Wilson Creek. There was a couple of times where I did slip out there on some steep gullies. Talked about the outsole potentially being an issue, something they're going to improve upon in the upcoming 055. But all in all, I was very happy with this race pick out at Wilson Creek. The energy of the shoe, the lightness was incredible. Like I said, there were some steep climbs, and being that there was no snow on the ground, footing was pretty good. love to have a light shoe when you're just like climbing, and you have good fitting. Didn't have to worry about that. You have decent lugs here, but I think if it would have been muddy or a little bit snowy, I'll talk about that for my next race. Maybe I would have wanted something with a more kind of tried and true proven outsole here, but it was perfect out there. One thing I was surprised about was the level of cushion on descents. The back half of the course, there were some technical descents, but there were some bombing, like smooth road super shoe type descent, you know, as long as you have a clear path, like where if you just had a super shoe, you can just fly. And I was pretty surprised that the level of heel cushioning was very protective in that. I thought, given the nature of the flexibility of the shoe, which I did know going into the race, I thought it would be a little bit harsher on the foot, but the Arnatel TPE foam did feel pretty protective. I will talk about this shoe later on when it comes to some of my race picks for longer distances, but for the 20-mile distance there, for my feet, this was perfect fit. From January into April, we're moving from the trails to the roads, or should I say the road, then the dirt, then a little bit of the road at the end. I'm talking about the race to Roby Creek. If you're out in Boise, Idaho, you know what I'm talking about. Got these in the wrong order here. Oops. I ran the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite Trail out at the race to Roby Creek. The previous year, I had run in the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2 road super shoe. I did a video where I was comparing that Nike super shoe, road super shoe, to this Puma shoe and also the Adidas Speed Ultra. Those were kind of my three choices for that race. It's a half marathon, 13.1 mile race, 2,100 feet of elevation gain. So you run out of town, you start off on the road, then you get into this long dirt climb. Down the backside, it gets a little bit steeper, so you're just bombing down this kind of it's not a trail, it's a forest road kind of, so it's a bombing dirt road. So you want something where you can just let it fly down that road, and something that's actually super soft and cushy in the heel. I had run the previous year, 2024, in that Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2, and I just felt like I could bomb on the heel, and it was stable enough where I could like manage it, and I've just really enjoyed like crashing into that heel and not worrying about harshness on the landings. This shoe I think was great. This has the carbon fiber plate in it. It is super energetic, still a little bit of flex to this shoe. I think it is a rocket on the trail, but one thing I would caution about this shoe, foam is just super energetic. The carbon fiber plate is also super energetic. I think when it gets to steep climbs, steep descents, twisty turns, I think it's a little tricky to handle with the energy from the plate and that foam. But for that kind of more or less straight up and down half marathon, I thought it was an awesome shoe. It's still 9.5 ounces, so ultimately, I believe a lot of the top runners, I ended up being 5th overall in that race. I dropped nearly 4 minutes off my time from the previous year. I have a race video up on that, giving a recap of kind of my training and pretty much how that happened going into it. But the shoe is a 9.5 ounce shoe. So while it is a fast trail shoe, I think my next percent is in the range of 7 or low 8 ounces. And all the guys around me, the winner certainly, top podium, top 10 area, they were all in road style super shoes. So I ultimately think the Nike Next Percent 2 would have been the fastest pick for me to run. But again, I did run 4 minutes faster in this shoe. Maybe, I think conditions were similar. It was a little bit cooler, but still 4 minutes is a lot. So this is definitely a fast shoe. Maybe I was in better shape. I don't know essentially what to make of it. I still think I could have run faster in the road super shoe because I didn't necessarily need to lean into the traction of this shoe, but it performed well for me. So highly recommended as a fast, runnable type course race shoe. One thing I will note is I talked about this in my first runs and reviews of this shoe. This Achilles collar just seems unnecessarily high. It seems like they could even have cut this height about halfway here. And I did get some blistering on the back of my heel and the Achilles area actually in this collar. So that'd be something to be wary of. Maybe take a look at that, maybe cut a little slit here, or maybe even trim it down, do some kind of, I don't know, modifications if that's something that's gonna get you. Something to be aware of in this shoe. I didn't feel it during the race, and again, you have that steep bombing descent in the second half of that race. So it could be the case that just the extended amount of that regular downhill at that angle was pushing it into the back of my Achilles. Can't say for sure, but it still does feel high, and I still did note that in my test run. So something to keep an eye out for this shoe, but definitely a top fast racing shoe in 2025. Moving on, 2 weeks after the race to Roby Creek, I did Heaven's Gate Marathon. Well, it's not actually a marathon. It was actually supposed to be 19 miles this year up in Riggins, Idaho. That is an extremely rugged mountain race. So I went from a in-town road and dirt, smooth, fast half marathon to like a true rugged, pretty much lots of sections off trail, very steep mountain run up 2 weeks later, Riggins, Idaho. This shoe was my pick. Last year I had run in the Catamount Agile, and I felt like this one just had a wider base than the Agile, and I really love the fit and security of this shoe. I feel like my heel is like super dialed in this. My foot feels locked into the bottom of this shoe. Really love it as a super fast kind of off-trail, even rugged mountain racing shoe. There's a carbon fiber plate in it, but it is still super flexible, which is pretty interesting for having a carbon fiber plate in this shoe. I have a US 10 in here, so I have a little bit of extra length, but being that there was so much up and down in that race, I actually thought that was an advantage. Being that with the 10, I didn't feel like my foot was moving at all. Again, I talked about, I love the fit of this shoe. I just have a little bit of extra space, close to a full thumb's width up front. I don't think that's detrimental. I actually think it's pretty good and useful when you're going down that descent. Even if you do slide a little, I was not jamming my toes at all. So that was a 19-mile race. The race was actually won by Zach Garner. He's a Norda athlete. He was running in 001s. If you paid attention to the Western States Lottery, he was drawn in the lottery, and he was one of the highlighted kind of fast runners that made it into Western States through the lottery. So keep an eye out for Zach. I'm sure he'll be in, I would assume, the 055 out at Western States. I mean, I haven't have inside information on that, but I would think that would be the shoe that he would go with. He went with the 001 out at that rugged race, so props to him for taking a kind of firmish mountain shoe out there. I think it was 001. He doesn't have any issues with the heel collar or anything like that. I don't either. So as long as that's a non-issue for you with the 001, I think it's a good pick for the mountain run. He talked about potentially choosing the 005 out at that race, but he was concerned again about the traction there. But there ended up being not that much snow on the course, not that much mud, so he said he could have probably gone with the 005. In any case, this was my pick for that. I did run with a gaiter. I have the Velcro still attached on there. I think this collar is a little bit open. You have that bolstering on the inside, and that pushes the actual collar off of the foot a little bit and can tend to let things in. So typical with any mountain race, when you're in that kind of especially steep terrain, you're kicking up rocks and dust and stuff. Good to have a gaiter on there. So love this pick for that race, and probably having all the shoes on the table here, this would still be the one that I would go for that race. All right, so transitioning to some of the longer distance racing, okay? Kind of leading into a January 20 miler, then a kind of a fast, get the speed legs going earlier in the season, fast half marathon, then another, well, I said 19-mile race. This was the race. Go check out my video. I ran off course in the end of this race. I was running in third place behind Zach and Mac Moss, ran off course, actually finished the race at 17 miles, but then I went back out and finished another 5 miles to get back to where I went off course and complete the loop so I can get an official finish there. So I run 22.5 miles and 9,400 feet of elevation gain on what was supposed to be, I think, a 19-mile race with like 7,000 feet of gain. So these things happen when you're out there. Early season, shorter races, transitioning to, I had a couple 100Ks on the calendar. The first one was River of No Return, 108K. I had just gotten this shoe before the race, and I got one 4-mile test run, and I decided to run in the On Cloudultra Pro. I will note, I had been running in the 005. This is a size 10. I talked about throughout my Norda videos. I feel like Norda runs a little bit short, has a little high volume. I was able to get a 005 in 10.5. Now, that was the shoe I was really looking at running at River of No Return because It is a rocky and rugged course at 108K, but it's not as bad as the later 100K Beaverhead, which I was planning on running. So I was thinking that I was gonna try to build my feet up or get more comfortable in running in this kind of flexible shoe out at River of No Return. I did test a couple different insoles. I was swapping in the TPU beaded insole from the 001, 002 models into this, just trying to get comfortable, but I felt like I just didn't have the foot strength. I was really concerned that I was gonna have foot pain over the course of 108K, that perhaps my feet were not up to the task of running that distance over those kind of rocks in the 005. So these did show up, and the level of cushion on these, I feel like, was more pronounced compared to that one. It has a more traditional kind of high stack super shoe feel, and they just felt comfortable on foot. I have a US 10 here. I had good length up front. It is a volume fit, which was at the time somewhat surprising from On. So I was very comfortable in the width in the forefoot, space in the toe box, the overall comfort of the upper, and it just felt softer underfoot. It felt like more stack. It has a nylon fiberglass plate. I feel like that added a little bit of touch of protection that the 005 didn't have. So I ultimately chose to run in this shoe, and I think that was an excellent pick. Like I said, Roner is a little bit more runnable, or I should say a lot more runnable than Beaverhead. Beaverhead is kind of a beast when it comes to technical terrain, but Roner has a lot of like bombing, big long climbs, big long descents, a lot of it quite runnable, and I felt very comfortable throughout 108K in this shoe. Check out my 108K review of this shoe. My full review includes race clips from that race. I think if you're in any type of ultra long distance race, especially if it's more, say, in the moderate range, I think this is an excellent pick. Compared to other trail super shoes, that nylon fiberglass plate, it seems to be less forgiving on the run, and the rocker just seems to be a little bit more smoothed out. So I think this shoe, compared to more, say, aggressive carbon fiber plates or even just stiffer carbon fiber plates, this shoe feels more like an everyday kind of shoe. Like you could almost run this shoe on an everyday basis without it feeling like a firm plated shoe, without it feeling like a crazy soft and bouncy super shoe. It has a nice level of deep softness to it, but not mushy softness. And again, the plate is not stiff or overly unstable. It's kind of like a really nice middle ground, and that's why I feel like it could also be a long distance training shoe that you would kind of get used to in your longer training runs, then still go ahead and race it on race day. So this is a great pick, and I think highly versatile for a wide range of runners to race in. I ran River of No Return, came home, was home for one day, then I went straight out to Trail Con, which is out at Lake Tahoe, California. Had a great few days out at there. I didn't go for the races. I didn't run at Broken Arrow. I got there because I was at Roner. So came home, drove over there, did the on group runs. Just like, it was just a fun event overall, but I'm kind of getting into the theme of cooking myself over the course of the season and just like kind of wearing myself down, which did kind of rear its head later in the year. After TrailCon Tahoe, I came home. I think I had another couple days, and then we went straight off on an RV trip through northern Idaho, up to Sandpoint, all around Missoula, Montana, and on the tail end of that trip, we went down to Salmon, Idaho, and I ran Beaverhead 100K. So I more or less rolled from Roner, drove myself all the way to Lake Tahoe, drove myself all the way back, spent 2 weeks in the RV, just traveling around, eating, drinking. This is like not an ideal setup. So I went out to Beaverhead. Check out, I did a couple of videos over in the Sandpoint area where I was testing out this shoe. I had in mind for Beaverhead, I had run in the Chirac 01. It might have been 2 years ago. I ran the shorter distance, the 50 or 55K, and my feet were wrecked. Like, that course is all rocks. There's a mile or a mile and a half long boulder field, and I just got totally wrecked running that shoe. I lost like a lot of my toenails, which doesn't typically happen for me, or actually had never happened to me up until that race. So I was going into Beaverhead this time thinking, I want to protect my feet at all costs. So that was kind of the impetus for choosing the Vectiv Pro 3 here. Ultimately, out of all my racing pick, I probably think this is the shoe that I probably, at the time, I talked about wanting to protect my feet. I will say it did protect my feet. My feet felt great and were perfectly fine. No issues with my toes, toenails, the bottom of my feet, impact, anything like that. What my intention was going in, they did the job. But my feeling on the day was that they were just heavy. It felt a little big and clunky, especially I'm talking about how rugged and rocky that course is. This was after running it again for the second time this year, but I think I underestimated going in just the extent to which the ruggedness of the course would require some more stability in my shoe pick. And this one has 2 plates in it. This is one of the probably the bounciest of the Dream Foams across the North Face line. And I just felt like even in my 2 test runs before that, you can check out the videos there, I felt like I could control the bounciness of it, the action underfoot, in order to get that level of protection, because it is a very protective shoe. Huge stack, you've got 2 plates, pretty much nothing gets through to your foot in this shoe. So if you're looking for that protection, and perhaps I think bigger runners, I think heavier runners, more, stout people than me, could probably handle the relatively higher weight of this shoe on foot compared to me being a lighter, thinner guy, having 11 ounces and just like all this bulk on my foot. It got to feel heavy throughout the course of this race, and I felt like maybe I would have wanted something a little bit lighter. Even if I had to sacrifice a little bit of protection, probably would have been a better pick. Also, I did get torn up. This midsole here got jabbed through by a lot of the sharp rocks underfoot there. So I don't know if other shoes would have done better on this course. My Chirac 01s, check out my 002 video, which I just posted. I showed my 01s, and a lot of the damage and how that shoe got torn up was from the Beaverhead 55K. So I don't want to hold the durability thing with the midsole, because this is exposed foam here, and it is pretty rocky underfoot, and my feet and normal shoes did get also torn up on this. So I'm 2 for 2 in getting completely destroyed feet-wise and shoe-wise in that race. So I don't hold it too much against this, but this is probably, out of all my racing picks, the one that I might want to change. All right, so after 2 100Ks, 108, 100K, Rona Beaverhead, I was feeling kind of beat up. It talked about going straight from Rona, straight to California, 2 weeks in the RV, long trip, hitting this and getting beat up at Beaverhead. I was kind of like dunzo for the year. I got in off the wait list for the Mammoth Triple, so I decided I'll go out to Mammoth. I've been running pretty regularly just for fun. I think Beaverhead was in July, Mammoth was in September, so I did have a 2-month gap, but it was the end of the summer. I was kind of like worn out at the end of the summer. So I went over to Mammoth, talk about my race picks for that. The first one was the Ascent, and I did a video where I was kind of choosing, I know this would be a great shoe. I ran this again out at Heaven's Gate. So I was choosing between this one, and I thought I had never run a VK type race before, the Dragon's Back Ascent out at Mammoth. So I thought it might be kind of cool to take the absolute lightest shoe that I have. So I was considering running in the S-Lab Pulsar here. I think this is a 6.5 ounce shoe, something crazy. I was also looking at the S-Lab Pulsar 4. I feel like that's similarly competitive with the Sky 2 here. I was kind of set on running in this one. I actually ran this a little bit on my way out there on a little kind of overnight camping area where I stayed. I was set on running this, but the day of the Dragon's Back Ascent was just torrential rain, horrific weather, and I decided these little skimpy lugs on the OG Pulsar were just not going to cut it. So I ended up falling back on the Sky 2 for that race, and I think it was a good pick. You got 5 mil lugs here. I had raced this shoe at Heaven's Gate. I know it could handle that rocky, rugged terrain, and I thought, I actually had never been on the Dragon's Back Ascent. I didn't know how loose or steep it could have been. I think I might have been okay with this because there wasn't really like loose or wet mud sections. Still, maybe not the best with these tiny lugs. It would have been okay definitely in the S-Lab Pulsar 4, but the 5 mil lugs here, the wide base under the forefoot, I just was comfortable running in this shoe. It was light, and I went with this one, and I think ultimately that was a good pick. Next day, 50K. I went with, I'm out of order again here. I went with the Craft Nordlite Ultra Pro. I was looking forward to running in this shoe after my initial test run. Check out my video. I had this one and the Explore Pro. And one of the striking features was how flexible this shoe was. The fit is drastically improved compared to all of the Craft shoes that I have run in the past. I just felt really comfortable. I love the wide forefoot fit on this shoe compared to previous Craft shoes. Again, I went and sized up to a US 10 in here, so I'm half size up in Craft, and I think that works perfectly for me. Even though it's kind of designed as a gravel shoe, I just felt the foothold in this shoe is so good, and I talked about that in that initial review video. I felt really comfortable on twisty trails and a variety of more like real type trails, not just gravel. I just think the foothold was really good, and the flex of the shoe allowed it to really adapt and contour underfoot. There's no plate in this shoe. So I thought the 50K out at Mammoth was the perfect pick for this one, and it was a Craft event, so it was good timing. Loved this shoe in that race. I had no issues at all. It was smooth throughout. 50K, protected the feet, no issues with the traction. There wasn't mud out there. I've heard that this is a gravel designed shoe. If it was really deep mud, maybe this wouldn't be as performant, but I didn't have to worry about there. It's typically a smooth California trails type of race, and I love the cushion of it, the geometry of the shoe, easy climbing with that flex. Check out my more recent heel rep video. I talked about why this is a great shoe for climbing. Heel lockdown is good. Kind of a little bit of elevation with the heel, and the flex of it just allows it to climb really well. And then on the backside of that 50K coming down, you have nice soft heel to crash into. Again, good protection under the forefoot. I mean, the foam, CR Foam Pro here, all throughout is just very soft, very energetic, and without the plate, you don't have to worry about being thrown off in any direction. It just felt very stable. I never had one issue or one instability throughout that 50K in this shoe. Another good racing pick, there's a few shoes here that have some plates. Not necessarily carbon here, a couple carbon plates here, carbon plate here, carbon plate here, nylon fiberglass here. If you were looking at a racing option that you want to have that flexibility, you don't want to have a plate, this would be a perfect one. Of course, you have the 005, but this is a little bit different. I feel like this is less underfoot. This is more flexible, less protective. I think the shoe is a bit more protective. So you have different kind of geometries, different options here. And that leads me into my next racing pick, which was, so I had, what was this, Friday, Dragon's Back Ascent. They had Saturday 50K, which also included the Dragon's Back Ascent. And then also the 26K included the Dragon's Back Ascent. I finally got to race in the Prodigio Pro. I've had this since the end of 2024, and I just didn't have the opportunity to race in this shoe, just timing-wise, race calendar-wise. Never had the chance to race in it, run in it quite a bit, tested it quite a bit, did a bunch of comparisons in this shoe, really loved it, but just didn't have that race day option. Again, I could have run it at probably Wilson's Creek, definitely could have run it at Heaven's Gate. Not the best, maybe half marathon shoe on that smooth course. Let's see, Roner, I feel like 100K I want a little bit more, so I probably wouldn't have chose it for that. 50K, of course, and the Ascent, I could have run this shoe in all three of those races, and I did see runners running in this shoe quite a lot out at Mammoth. The 26K, I didn't feel amazing in the Ascent. I didn't feel amazing in the 50K, but surprisingly on the back half of the 26K, I kind of found my legs. I found myself kind of in the mix with a few other runners that were like in my range, and also we were chatting and they were doing the triple, so got a little fired up. The second half of that 26K, I just felt great in this shoe. It wasn't as steep of descents in the back half of that 26K compared to the 50K, and I felt like the profile of this shoe, the geometry, really worked well for that kind of rolling up and down, moderate, kind of light descent. I just felt like I could fly in this shoe, especially going downhill. And again, the fit was excellent. This shoe just fits me like a glove. Talked about it quite a bit across different videos. Love this shoe. Check out my Prodigio Roundup. Compared it to the upcoming Prodigio 2. That could be another option if this shoe is too flexy underfoot for you or not enough protection, you think. keep an eye out for the Prodigio 2 coming out in 2026. But 26K here, certainly could have run it also at the 50K. For me, I feel like that is the racing range of this shoe. But again, there's runners that have stronger feet. They're used to running in a little bit less underfoot. For me, I talked about struggling to feel confident that this is going to protect my feet enough for some of those longer ultras. But if you're in the camp where you like light and flexible and you feel like that's not an issue for you, you're totally comfortable running a thinner, more flexible shoe, less protective, something like this in a longer distance, you're certainly well within range with this shoe as well. So depending on your personal preference and your ability level, foot strength, another great racing option for 2025 and 2026 going forward. Okay, let's finish up my racing year. I was at Mammoth, came home, had a trip planned out to Germany, family trip. 3 weeks after Mammoth, running those 3 races, I ran a road marathon. This was completely unplanned. We were visiting my sister-in-law. She lives out in Munich. Said, hey, are you running the marathon? The marathon's gonna be here in the few days we're staying in Munich before going down more further south into Bavaria in Germany. So I said, okay, well, I'll run the marathon. Luckily, I had gotten this Rocket X3 from Hoka. I had been running in that same Next Percent 2 for my last 3-4 marathons maybe. That was the option again for that race to Roby Creek, but I had this one, wanted to try something different. The fit of the Nike shoe, it has that weird like angled fit. I would always have to do something funny with the laces, never quite felt comfortable, but again, it's a Vaporfly, it's, you know, it's a super shoe. It was fast, so I just dealt with the fit. This shoe, from the moment I put it on, felt like it just was an easy fit. Like it's shaped to my foot. It looks like a foot when you put it on, and I can just lace it up and don't even really think about the fit too much. I ran a road marathon with about a week's notice. I actually ran, and this kind of like was completely shocking to me. I ran 2:34:23. I got a marathon PB by 4 minutes and 40 seconds. I was 9th overall in the Munich Marathon. I could not believe it. I don't know what quite to make of it, because I felt like I was petering off in the second half of my season. I went into it kind of hot, feeling great, and then I just got beat up in those 100Ks. Had a little fun out at Mammoth, no pressure, didn't really race out at Mammoth. It was more for the experience. And then I just decided, hey, I'm running a marathon. When you're running a marathon, you got to try to run fast. So I got a couple of speed workouts in the 1 week before the race, and then just ran. If you're looking for, I don't know, a potential road racing shoe, Rocket X3. Love the shoe from Hoka. The fit is excellent, and I don't know, worked out well for me. So that put a wrap on 2025 for me. That was again in October. As soon as I got back from there, actually my girls basketball team, the season was ongoing. I had to miss a game and I had to miss a week of practice while I was over there, which was unfortunate, but got super busy after that. My team, my girls, we actually made it to the Final Four of the city. So my girls' elementary basketball team made it to the Final Four of Boise, which was super exciting. I was like totally like zoned in and locked in on that. It was just an amazing ride. So I was not even like thinking about running in the end of the year. I had TRE coming up in December, so pretty much like not thinking about racing for the rest of the year. Let's talk about 2026. What do I have coming up? I'm gonna go back to Wilson's Creek. I think I have a little bit of a back issue now. I was cutting bathroom tiles, tweaked my back a little bit. So I've been off for a couple days, which is a little unfortunate because Wilson's Creek is a month away. So I'm gonna try to go out to Wilson's Creek. What am I gonna run at that race? I ran again in the 005. I have this Kip Run Kip Summit race shoe, and this shoe feels great. I am itching to just see what this shoe can do in a race type condition. It is carbon plated, so it would be a different type of shoe for that race out at Wilson's Creek. I talk about this being unplated, flexible. This one's certainly less flexible. I feel like this is definitely a faster shoe, but it has Vibram outsole here, and the fit is great. So this is one option I am looking at if I were to go and do that race. If I feel okay, I'm not sure if I would do 50K or 20 miles. We'll see how I feel. Then, let's say April, I am running the Banana Slug Backyard Ultra. way back in the previous year, I had won a local backyard ultra here, bronze coin. Now this is a silver coin race in April out in Oregon. That race is the qualifier for the actual Bigs Team World Championships out in Tennessee in Laz's backyard. So I have a chance there. I'm gonna try to give it my best shot, and perhaps a shoe that is an honorable mention. I talked about this being a best racing shoe roundup, and a shoe that is a top best of 2025 shoe, which I haven't raced in, and I'm not quite sure when I would have raced it in, given the kind of racing calendar that I had, is the Mount to Coast H1. This shoe is a spectacular shoe, lightweight, fit is excellent, foam energetic, and for that backyard ultra coming up, this is a top option for that race. Given the lightweight, the efficiency of having a lightweight shoe, wide, comfortable upper, especially if you size up. Don't go down. I heard people talking about going down a half size. Don't listen to that. I'm up a half size. I had true to size 9.5. I'm a 10 in this one, and it's perfect, especially if you're gonna do something long like that. So don't go down a half size. Don't listen to anyone like that. As far as 2026 racing options, backyard ultra, something to that effect. Got this shoe right here. Also for backyard ultra style, I've got the North Face Alta Mesa 500 V2. This shoe feels really great. Check out my first run in this. I got a couple more runs since then. I actually had one quick run on the canal path where I felt really strikingly fast in this shoe for being so big. The fit is wide and comfortable for something like a backyard ultra or less technical, more light, moderate trails, long distance, even 100-mile ultra. I think this is gonna be a racing option in 2026. So keep an eye out for that one. Next on the calendar, I'm gonna go back to Heaven's Gate. I haven't signed up yet, but I always go there. It's fun. It's about a one-day trip, sleep, go race, run up a mountain, 7,000 feet, whatever, good fun. Sky 2 is probably my best option at this point, but I also have the Chirac 02. I'm not sure if that shoe is protective enough, or it feels a little tall and skinnier than this shoe. I'm not sure if it's stable enough to handle that kind of race. I have not raced in the S-Lab Pulsar 4, so maybe all things being equal, having run the race last year or this year in this shoe, next year in 2026, maybe we'll try this one. So that would be Heaven's Gate, again, coming in the spring. I am signed up and registered for Broken Arrow this year. I am signed up for the Triple. I was wanting to go out again for TrailCon, keeping my options open. I was in the Western States lottery, didn't make it into that one, so I signed up for the Broken Arrow Triple. So I'll be out there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, racing there, leading into TrailCon, make a little trip out of that. We'll see. That's a long ways away. That is in mid to late June. So all options are on the table as far as those racing distances. I'll give that more thought once I get down to that. I'm also gonna put my name in for UTMB. I have to get over there, do the big loop one of these years before I get too old. A lot of the second half of the season, when in this year I ran those 100Ks, is gonna hinge on if I get into the UTMB lottery. If I get into the lottery, I'm gonna go to UTMB, and that'll be that. If not, I'll look at keeping the Western States lottery bowl rolling. I Am Tough. Saddles 100 is a race that looks interesting to me. Kodiak 100K, stuff that would get me a qualifier for Western States for next year. I would love to go back to Mammoth. Depends again on the race calendar. If something shakes out with UTMB, or I want to get one of those other types of qualifiers in for the Western States lottery, keep that thing going. Not sure if I'll be able to get to Mammoth, but I would like to. Okay, I have some notes on some shoes that I'm looking forward to in 2026. And I'm gonna talk about the races I ran in 2025 first. Of course, I talked about the Mount to Coast H1. They also have the C1 coming out. That's gonna be a higher stack, super trainer style. Now, I'm not sure if that will be out in time for my race, which is coming up in April, the Backyard Ultra. So I'm looking at the North Face shoe, the H1, and potentially the C1. The C1 has more of a flat road type outsole, so I have to take a closer look. That's on dirt out in Oregon, but I'm not sure how much traction you really need out there. Certainly this shoe would be fine, but the C1 I think has more of a smoother road type outsole, but that would be an option and something I'm looking forward to in 2026. Of course, Norda 055, those races that I talked about, perhaps this shoe not being enough. Some of those 100Ks, depending on what I end up doing, It has a higher stack than the 005. My worries about protection could perhaps be alleviated in the 055. And they're also going with pretty much the outsole of the 001, 002. That amount of lugs, you don't have those big gaps in between. Having a more fuller lug coverage, deeper lugs as well, I think they're 5 millimeters, that tends to eat up a lot of rocks underfoot. Like, I mean, the lugs, more space covered, they're just gonna catch more of the stuff and not let it get to those in-between spots. Between the lugs and the increased stack height, that could put, at least for me, the 055 into the mix for some of those longer races that I didn't choose it for, Roner, Beaverhead, 100K type stuff, that I was kind of unsure about the 005 in. Another shoe, the North Face Off Trail Ultra, that shoe looks awesome. I talk about potentially going back to Heaven's Gate and running one or the other of these shoes. I think they are phasing out the Infinite model. So the Off Trail Ultra is gonna be kind of the replacement, taking over for the Infinite. It has the built-in gaiter. I talked about using the gaiter on this shoe. It kind of looks like this shoe. It doesn't have the plate, and I think it's a little bit narrower than this shoe, but that's a shoe that I'm looking forward to. But that shoe's not coming out until the fall, so I wouldn't be able to have that on my feet at Heaven's Gate. But just thinking ahead to if you had a fall race that was a similarly rugged, the shoe was called the Off Trail Ultra, something like that race, I would love to have that shoe on my feet for something like Heaven's Gate. I talked about another shoe, Kip Summit Race. I talked about this potentially out at Wilson's Creek. This is a shoe I feel like could go very well up against a lot of the top shoes on the market. Certainly, it's very close to the Cloudultra Pro. I feel like it's more stable than this shoe. It's certainly lighter. This shoe is 9.5 ounces, whereas this shoe is north of 11. Tecton X3 is another one where this is a clear competitor. Adidas Speed Ultra, anything where you're thinking about those shoes, this shoe is going to be in the mix. So keep an eye out for this one in 2026. Another shoe I have here is, this was a contender, close call. Actually, not a close call. This is the Silent Pro. Silent 2 is coming out from Arc'teryx in 2026, which is the successor to the Silent Pro. I got this shoe shortly after running Beaverhead. Check out my review. I did a big long run in the Sawtooth in this shoe, and I really loved it. The one thing that was questionable to me was the rocker feel. I felt it was quite prominent, a little bit of a stiffer rocker. I wasn't sure how that would fare in very technical terrain, if it would be stable enough. The foothold is amazing in this shoe. I got this after Beaverhead, a little bit after, and the first thing that came in my mind is, I wish I would have had this earlier before Beaverhead, because I feel like it has a good level of protection that I want. The foothold, really great. I would have been questioning the rocker and stability out at Beaverhead on those rocks, but I think this would have been the shoe. Had I had both of these before, ahead of Beaverhead, I would have probably gone with this one. In 2026, Silent 2, they're removing a lot of that rocker out of it. I think they said they're flattening out the ride, giving it more of a mountain kind of feel to it. They thought the rocker leaned more into like smoother kind of running terrain, and they really want to be focused on that really rugged mountain type of terrain. So that makes it even more of a pick if I were to run a race like Beaverhead, mid to long distance ultra in very rugged mountain terrain. Silent 2 is a shoe to look out for. They're also changing the outsole. These are a little tight lugs here. I think they're spacing it out more to shed mud. So Silent 2, look out for that one, 26. Another one, Craft Shippe Gravel Pro. Got to look at this one with David Sinclair. I talked about a lot of these kind of runnable races. A race like Roner, that shoe's certainly a Western States type race. Even I'm not sure about the Backyard Ultra. It may be a little too fast, a little bit unstable for a race where you're not necessarily trying to go fast, but runnable gravel type terrain, smoother to moderate. It is called the Gravel Pro. Keep an eye out for that shoe. A couple of wild cards here. I have this one listed as a wild card because I talked about it for Backyard Ultra, and I talked about it even for 100-mile races. I'll be interested to see what North Face pros are running in 2026, especially early races. If there's any of those early 100-milers, I want to see if any of them are choosing this model, because I think it could be a great 100-mile pick. Certainly for those that are not looking for extreme speed. Maybe if you're not a pro middle of the pack runner, it's just like normal runners, I think this is a really great option. Last couple of wild cards here. Of course, Nike ACG Ultrafly 2. I got to try it on. It's a wide fit. I'm not quite sure. It has those stiff carbon plates in it. I'm not sure how that's going to ride. Based on the feel, it was definitely a wider fit. The upper felt okay, but I made a note, like it felt good in a 10, but it felt even a little bit roomy. So I wasn't sure if I would try it in my true to size 9.5 and if that would be good for a long ultra. So I think that shoe, being so far removed from version 1, which was, at least in my mind and a lot of people's mind, quite disappointing, I think that is a wild card as far as racing in 2026. And the last one I have is the S-Lab Ultra Glide 2. I have my regular Ultra Glide 2 downstairs. This is, of course, is not the same shoe. That shoe felt vaguely good underfoot. The spheres, they felt okay. It felt like a smooth riding shoe. There's no plate in it. It felt very protective. It could be like a long ultra shoe, kind of in the way that this one is, but the upper was just not good. The tongue moved around a lot. They had cut down the Achilles height in a version 1.5. So they went a little lower in 1.5. 2, they're going to a full matrix style upper. It looks very close to the S-Lab Genesis, something I think everybody expected from the beginning. That is a shoe, if that upper fits my foot as well as the S-Lab Genesis upper that I have, love that. That's one of the best uppers out, the S-Lab Genesis upper. If I get the same level of foothold in the S-Lab Ultra Glide 2, that is another wild card. That could be a bomber racing pick in 2026. So we'll see. I think that about covers it. I hope that gave you some insights as far as racing picks across the board for different shorter distances, long distances. All these shoes are available now. They're going to be available for 2026. So if one of the races that I ran, if you know about it, go back and check the videos. I have a lot of clips where I'm running in those races. You can kind of see what I'm covering in these models that I talked about here. Maybe one of these is going to be a good pick for your 2026 race, and I hope I put some ideas in for some shoes that definitely you should have on your radar for 2026. Again, the Mount to Coast shoes for those type of longer ultras, multi-day even stuff. Silent 2 I think is going to be awesome. The Kip Run shoes, North Face, of course. Salomon, lots of awesome stuff coming out. Trail running shoes are on fire from 2025 into 26. You're going to have a lot of options to choose from. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you for tuning in throughout 2025. I hope you will have a great end of the year, last few days here, and a great start to the racing season in 2026. If you need help deciding or talking through some ideas for race shoe picks in 2026, leave me a comment down below. I'll be happy to help you out. Thank you for watching once again. I'll see you back here or out on the trails.